Hi, Doug Dormer here. This is Module 3, Lesson 3 in our series on consumer health informatics, empowering the patient as a consumer. And in this lesson, I talk about the impact of the regulation, part 2, where we'll try to say, what does it all mean? What does the regulatory and legislative environment mean today for the development of consumer health informatics? And of course, as I said in the beginning of today's module, we're not going to drill into every little thing that's happening in the political environment as we see the beginning of the second Trump administration. But we'll get close to that, at least to have the general environment. And then as we move through the course of this series of lectures over the next 3 months, and hopefully as things settle down a little bit, we'll be able to draw some further insights from what we see from the administration. You recall this from last month. I can't resist my terrible artwork. Why I am not a graphic artist in any way. But I was talking pre-2017 and really giving you the list of all of the pieces of legislation that got us to 26 when the Cures Act was passed and collectively then builds to where we are today. There are a few more things, but those are the main things that have set the stage for healthcare IT broadly and consumer health informatics in particular. One of my students pointed out that I didn't mention on this map HIPAA, which is absolutely true. I didn't because HIPAA was passed in what, 1998, late 1990s, pre-2004, and I kind of define that as the old world. And while it focuses a lot on privacy and security and there are some important elements of it, it doesn't focus directly on the technology. So that's why what we did here. So we're going to begin just by saying we note what that road looks like, from high tech to the Affordable Care Act to the Excellence in Mental Health Act, all the things leading up to the Cures Act of 2016. How do we summarize then where we are? Well, first of all, the Cures Act requires that protected health information be made available to consumers. Information blocking, as it's called in the Cures Act, is prohibited. The Cures Act, with related standards, makes it easier to connect with EHR systems, to connect EHR systems with CHI, and to connect through health information exchanges. But here's the thing. Neither the Cures Act nor any of that other stuff we looked at requires or provides direct incentives for providers to offer consumer health informatics applications, even when those applications have been shown to improve health outcomes. So the point here is that improving health outcomes by itself is not enough to make a business case, is not enough to justify the investment, either as a practitioner investing in the technology or as a developer building the technology. The incentives have not been strong at all. Even with the shift from pay for performance to value-based care, which essentially says, if you take better care of the patient, you should get paid more, it's still been a tenuous relationship to show that empowering the consumer has thus far resulted in a value proposition sufficient to warrant the investment in not only the development of the technology, the deployment of the technology, and the use of the technology, and the risk that is associated with consumer health information technology from the provider's perspective. Now, all of that we've talked about in the earlier modules, so I won't go through all of that in detail, but you get the gist. Nor is there financial incentive for providers to incorporate consumer-directed work information into their workflow. That's really an extension of the same idea. Finally, in the absence of direct incentives, there is a case to be made for indirect incentives through value-based care. There is a case to be made, but it's not well developed, and that's what I want to talk about next. The Cures Act limits the amount of premiums that payers can use for non-direct care to 20%. That doesn't seem like it's directly related to consumer health informatics, does it? But let's work on it and think about how it might. And let me begin by showing you mine. Can I get this in here? You can see it. It's a check. I got a check a couple days ago from Blue Cross Blue Care Network of Michigan for $17.76. Big time. Can buy ice cream. And the reason is in 2018, Blue Care Network spent on average only 79% of its total of $819 million of its after-tax premium revenue on healthcare. Since it missed the 80% target, 1% by 1%, Blue Care Network must rebate a total of 1% on your market segment. So this is my part of the 1%. Now, that was 2018 that I got paid for the other day. Excuse me. I will tell you that the letter also talks about 2019, where they actually only had 77% cover of direct costs of $772 million. But I can't figure this letter out. It gets into, well, that resulted in a 3% deficit, but you've already got an original rebate of 2.6%. No, I didn't. So there's 0.4%. I don't know how that world they get to this calculation. There's a lot of information. It's not clear to me, but it illustrates kind of the point, and that has consequences then. Let's see. One of the consequences is that since insurance companies are constrained in the amount of profit and overhead that they can carry by this 20%, we've seen a vertical integration, it's called, in the industry, where insurers, or as payers, maybe as third-party administrators, are investing in providers because there isn't a limit on the profit that a provider can make. So now saying we, through an affiliate, I'm speculating, will buy a hospital or a physician practice. And then, since we are the ones determining who gets paid and how much gets paid under either a managed care plan or under whatever insurance or payment arrangement, since we determine how much they get paid, we can affect how much we are paying essentially ourselves. It also puts insurers in the position to say, not only am I looking for costs which reduce for investments that not only reduce my cost, but also where I can spend that money as a part of my cost and make money from it. Suddenly, payers have a new incentive for investing in consumer health informatics because they're not only saying it lowers the cost and improves health outcomes and gives me a competitive advantage, but if it's successful in the market, I make money because I own it and I'm not in violation of the 20% rule. That's a big-time market change that exists and is not, at least at the moment, under flux because of the political environment. Significant deal that, as we talk now about the various types of consumer informatics, will cause us to ask questions about who should we be looking at to invest in this? What's the value proposition? How does that work? So in response, as I say, insurers are buying providers, particularly physician practices, and are now opening up to the opportunity of investing in technology. Which still leaves the question, where is the incentive for consumer health informatics? Well, right now under MACRA in particular, the Medicare and CHIP Reauthorization Act, but for this purpose, the legislative environment and regulatory environment says we're shifting from fee-for-service, paying the providers for doing things without respect to the outcome, to saying you've got to have value-based care. That forces providers to share in the risk of patient outcomes. That's the substance of value-based care. We're not just going to give you money every time you provide a service. We're going to give you money if it gives value to improve health outcomes. That's the purpose. But providers then respond by saying, that's just not fair. How can you make me pay a penalty when I can't control what my patients do when they aren't in my office. And that has at least as much to do with the outcomes as anything I do as a provider. Frankly, it's a pretty reasonable kind of position for them to take. Therefore, providers will either try to filter patients to have those who live more healthy lifestyles, live healthier lifestyles, and who adhere to therapeutic guidance in one bucket, and those who don't at another. Now, I have to relate this to politics a little bit, particularly Senator Vance, now Vice President Vance, has been advocating for moving away from the protections for pre-existing conditions to say that it would be more fair to have different pools based on health risk. So that is a variation on this theme here, trying to filter or pool, group, bundle patients. Now, the consequence is those who don't adhere or who have chronic conditions that are more difficult to manage would be in a higher cost tier of insurance. And those who have lower cost, less chronic conditions, no chronic conditions, adhere to the regimen, are in a lower cost tier. Now, that's been a common criticism of Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, all along, and it's a reasonable one. People who had lower insurance because they were now merged into a larger pool with people who weren't as healthy or didn't live as carefully as they do, their premiums went up. There's no doubt about it. So there's an argument to be made, and I'm not making the political or moral argument here. I'm saying there's an argument to be made. That's one direction we may, and is actively under discussion in the environment today. Excuse me. The other argument, the other alternative, is for providers to look for ways to encourage patients to improve their lifestyle and adhere to therapeutic guidance. And that sets up consumer health informatics as a means of encouraging, engaging, and tracking consumer adherence to the medication, the therapeutic regimen. So we're entering a new period, again, separate from the whole political discussion, when providers will be working with payers to create new incentives, probably monetary, direct or indirect, for improved healthcare behaviors. That is behavioral medicine, not mental health, but behavioral medicine, how you behave with respect to your health. These will initially focus on patient adherence and lifestyle, and that will lead to an expanded role for consumer health informatics to express evidence-based practice as a complement to traditional inpatient, in-person encounters. So that's the background. Next up, we're finally ready to talk about evidence-based practice. I hope you'll join me on the next video. Thank you.